in that number over a 5-year period. And again, we're looking at 15 years from now. We had put in the climate plan a smaller number, slightly smaller number, but it seems that with the number of trees that have been removed and continue to be removed even in the last 6 months, it's gotten to the point where it's very alarming, and the ecosystem services provided by the trees are eroding at a much faster pace. And I know that this has been an area of budget cuts in recent years, but our message is to the decision makers, this is something that's really important to a lot of people in Hartford. That's over and over again. So it's really time to give this priority. And again, I know that the Tree Commission has been working on this, trying to create an implementation plan to make this happen. So we're respecting that number. Other things in this category, let me read through and then I'll turn back around. Phytoremediation on brownfields. So we have a lot of brownfields that could be planted even over the short term to remove toxins from soils. Directing plantings to heat island areas. Back in 2017, the Tree Commission and our GIS department did a study showing where the hottest areas of the city are. So if we're directing the trees to those areas of the city, of course it has a cooling effect on those hot areas. Our city forester is always recognized for her techniques. We want to become a model for city forestry nationally. We think we can do it. We have the passion here. We know it's here. Establishing new meadows and wetlands, and then again here identifying removing invasive plants. So these are in the plant category, but obviously very interrelated. Yeah, you had a question.
So I was just going to ask the reconstruction of some of these buildings in addition, and additional buildings that you want to build, where are these trees going to go, eventually the hotspots?
Yeah, so great question. So for those of you who didn't hear it over here, the question was, what happens when you're building buildings? Shouldn't you also be prioritizing for trees? So the new zoning code actually goes pretty far for new buildings in identifying an amount of trees for every new building or a percentage of the lot that has to be covered by tree canopy. And we also have a way for those property owners who can't comply with the requirements to pay into the city's tree fund, and then the city can then go out and plant. So that's been set up as of 2016, and it's, I think, hopefully working to get more trees, even in places where you have a lot of a big building that you might want to build. For example, when somebody builds a new building downtown, they're going to have to outsource their tree requirements. Oh yeah, sure.
How do you plan on involving the city in this? And this caters towards the age question that I asked. Because as a young person, we don't know about that survey. We haven't heard about that.
The what?
As a young person in the city, we the surveys goes over our heads. We don't know about.
Yeah, that's a good point. So getting back to the process, we heard early on that we understood that we were not necessarily reaching young people, and I would say young people in the 21 and under category. So as part of these meetings, these 48 public meetings with about 1,100 people, we did meet with 7th graders in the Hartford Youth Scholars Program. We met with the Obama Fellows. We met with the Youth Service Corps. So while we were meeting with the seniors, we were also really trying to make a concerted effort to meet with people, I would say 21 or so and under, presented it to different student groups as well. But you're right. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of distill these issues down for young people and make sure they're involved. We tried our best to do that, though.
I think specifically talking about young people, as somebody who is 21 and under, a specific reference to people who are not Scholars Foundation, which are very great students. They pay attention to this stuff. But the students who are hardest to reach, kids who go to Weaver, kids who go to Buckley, who go to Hartford High. Yeah,
so that's another sort of just logistical issue. They're not going to, schools are not necessarily going to, allow all this to go into their program.
Do you plan on getting them involved in this process? Possibly helping them.
So again, we've tried to date. If you have other ideas, I'd love to talk afterwards. That would be great. Great.
So actually, With respect to the 3,000 trees, I understand, now we're trees planted on the planet. There's increasing evidence that buying trees from the nurseries and planting them doesn't necessarily, it's expensive, right? About $600 a tree. But it doesn't necessarily mean you get the most robust trees. And there's the growing no-mow strategy where you allow the genetic trees from the pre-European tree cultures to regrow. And that those are the most likely to survive the stresses because their roots are connected underground.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see the word "and nurture" in this, but I also think that you need to recognize the opportunity for no mowing areas, not only for the tree, but also for meadows.
Yeah, so the city has its Department of Public Works has developed no-mow areas or low-mow areas, and so I think they're moving in that direction, and we'll have to think about what we want to say as a 15-year goal for that. Is there something that we can say in the plan, or is it just more of a general policy? And I should say, one of the things when we reviewed as a planning commission on Tuesday night, the final bullet points of the plan, we actually tried to delete or tried to organize some of the ideas in a way so that we weren't just saying, okay, DPW staff, go out and do this on your own, right, and make this policy on your own. We're trying to expand it or make it really a shared priority. So, trying to figure out how that balance works. When DPW already has a no-mow or low-mow policy, we'll have to look a little bit further into that.
No low-mow for respect to meadows, which is great. That was part of the urban forest treaty. Now moving towards and allowing these again pre-European settlement root systems to allow the next generation of trees that are genuinely native to these areas.
Yeah. I mean, the other question too, and we don't get into this in the plan, is whether our native trees are actually going to survive climate change. We're actually going to have to, I think we're going to have to change some of our trees. And you may speak to that.
No, I don't think this ought to turn into one giant tree. Actually, it should. Let's just talk about it.
Well, that one last tree comment, and then we'll get to the resiliency aspect.
And in fact, one question I had for you is, since there's going to be a lot more feedback, how do you want to get it?
Oh, the best way, even outside the meeting?
Yes.
Well, we have 5 more meetings and on different topics, some of which we've just touched on a little bit tonight as a result of your questions, but also online, hartford2035.org. There are feedback forms that we can actually log, what category you're interested in, and make it available in written form. So that's really the best place because it goes right to one centralized source, and we can get it to the planning commission and everybody making decisions.
Yeah, the Tree Advisory Commission is meeting day after tomorrow.
Yes, I mean,
and we'll be talking.
Yeah, I mean, the commission chairs, I think I've sent an email, but I'll send another one for commission chairs like yourself to make sure that we also have direct dialogue, because commissions represent, a sort of common view.
One thing I do want to mention, if I can have one more second. We've learned a couple of things since you came to the commission. One is we figured out that about half of the trees in the city are actually on private property. And attending to that part of our forest involves kind of a different way of looking at things. And then we did an inventory of our street trees and found that there are about 12,000 potential planting locations along our streets. So if we're going to plant 3,000 a year, we're going to run out of space to really get the amount of planting that needs to happen. we need to encourage much more planting of private property. And figuring out how to do that is going to be a task for us
Yes.
going forward.
It's a big task, but that's why one of the reasons why we identified the top 10 priorities amidst all of these bullet points that you see is so that it will get people talking. So when we say trees are a top priority, lots of people in Hartford might say, what are you talking about? Why are trees important? And that gives us an opportunity to go back and say, well, this is why they're important, and explain what the research shows us. Because I agree, people have not fully bought into this idea. But one of the reasons to put it in here is because enough people have said it over and over again in these kinds of meetings that those people who might not have been paying attention to the issues can say, oh, okay, oh, now I see, and kind of carry on with their responsibilities under this shared plan. Okay, I do want to move on to resiliency so we can get our last three categories in here. So resiliency, so we know the definition of resiliency, right? The ability to recover from some event in usually a problem when a problem arises. So we're talking about things like power outages, food shortages, what else do we have? Floods, threatening conditions that can really disrupt our lives. So how resilient is Hartford? We have made some strides in this area. As I said, we had the first public-private microgrid in Connecticut, which powers Parkville when the grid goes down. But we can also do other things. So we can identify more carefully our risks. We think that redesigning the riverfront is a resiliency issue. Planning for food distribution, planning for flexible transportation, building resilient energy infrastructure. So again, we identified transportation and food because we know that many of our residents are transportation and food insecure. The energy infrastructure issue, we don't see as many power outages in Hartford as some of the suburban and rural communities do. However, we still do see them, and we should also plan for energy resiliency too. Any comments about this topic?
The resiliency issues about the primary ecosystem service benefits, which is flood control, absorption of the urban habitat, stormwater mitigation. Those are all on the riparian corridors. And the ones
Yes, and those are actually all listed in our next section.
The ones that really affect the neighborhood is not the Connecticut River. It's the North Branch, the South Branch, Gully Brook, and the other smaller tributaries that some of them are unnamed. The riparian corridors, the conservation and revitalization of the riparian corridor, wetlands and their slopes, and because the river doesn't exist without its river, without its landscape, right? That sentence needs to be in there because it's an opportunity, and otherwise what is happening is we're losing property along the riparian corridors, one block, one site at a time, where you're cutting down trees, old trees, and you're increasing flooding on people's properties.
So I think we got the point, but I want to make sure that we get any other comments on this. So hold that point because we're going to see it again in the next section too, I think. Any other comments on general resiliency topics? Do these resonate with you? Are these things that we should be planning for and doing as threats arise? Did you have a comment? Okay.
Well, yeah, sort of. Quite more question, actually. I was thinking back to the energy earlier, and I see riverfront here again. Trash plant, where does that fall?
Oh, yes. So I should say our last two categories are river, water, slash water, and waste. So we'll get to the trash plant in a moment. But again, many of these bullet points could have been listed in multiple categories, and in a couple of cases they are, but there's a lot of overlap. Okay, so getting to the river. We said river here, but we're really probably talking about water as a whole. We have improved water quality in some significant ways, both in the river and beyond, in the Connecticut River and beyond. Through the zoning code, we've established new rules We've got, thanks to Shubha Combly and the Sustainability Office, rain barrels. We have a green infrastructure coordinator in the city, but there's a lot that needs to be done in a city like ours with so much pavement, frankly, that prevents us from doing all we can on this. So a couple of things that we have in this category, again, the river, possibly creating a local stormwater utility. So New London has done this, and it has helped them to manage stormwater infrastructure. Changing laws to reduce rooftop runoff. One example of this is this is getting too technical, but anyway, we require people to connect their downspouts. If we allowed more people to disconnect their downspouts, that would be better. The North Branch Watershed Management Plan, stewardship signage, meaning those kinds of signs that remind people that when they dump paint into the sewers, it goes directly into the river. There has been an idea for a regional river consortium. Probably this is a big one. It probably should be moved up in this list if we think of them as priorities. Scaling green infrastructure. So we have a few limited green infrastructure projects around the city. Again, I know Shubha and her office are working really hard on this. And then changing the mindset so we see gray infrastructure as the last resort. So gray infrastructure means concrete. Green infrastructure means managing stormwater with bioswales and plantings. So comments on these. Are these likely to make our water cleaner?
It's nice to see those there.
And again, many of these are also in the climate action plan. So for those of you who saw that document, these are very similar. Yes?
How do you plan on reducing lawyers and stuff? I think it's one of the reasons why I wanted to use it.
What was that? I can't hear you.
Like reducing lawyers. Choosing my lives. Like, 30, so people are just throwing trash in there.
Oh, okay, yeah, littering. Yeah. So that's an important one too. And actually that kind of ties us into the next section. Before we move on, any other comments on this?
Again, I'm going to make another plea for self-breath.
Yes, and I think,
personal work,
yeah.
like 20 years. In my mind, I have a dream that someday it will be the riverfront capture in the Behind the Rocks neighborhood. So look at it from a broader perspective.
Excellent. Yeah, good comment.
Quick one.
Definitely do that. Oh,
Besides concentrating on the 18 square miles, we also have 1,000 acres there in Batterson Park. Is there any focus that has been placed
not
on?
at all. Nobody's mentioned Batterson Park until this moment, Mr. Benjamin. What would you like for us to say?
I'm looking at its preservation, one, and secondly, on the use of that beautiful facility that we have.
Yeah.
It's still under the control of the City of Hartford.
So, and were there conversations about, I think there are ongoing conversations about what to do with it, when to open it, when to open the boating on it, all of that.
And I think it's underutilized asset. And secondly, I know there are about 80 acres that is owned by the pension fund that we're in the process of disposing of, but there are, as I said, it's about 1,000 acres. And we need to place some particular attention to that large
I don't
area
think we
that
can
we
put in
have.
the city plan, pay attention to Batterson Park.
No, well,
So
you know,
we have to think, okay, what do we,
regarding its preservation, one,
okay,
and based on all the ecological factors that you mentioned, and secondly, because it's an underutilized asset when it comes to the particular waterway there, I take it that some efforts can be taken in order to study that area and perhaps come up with action steps in order to make that a more highly productive asset that probably the funding, of course, can go back into the pension fund in order to maintain the entire area.
okay, that's great, thank you. Yes, you had a comment, Brett.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, so I was hoping maybe someone else might speak up to our own river part of, or I should say, segment of the Park River here in Asylum Hill near Woodland. I've heard mentioned uncovering. I've heard mentioned in the past of perhaps uncovering part of where it's buried and reconnecting to that river here in our neighborhood. I don't know if someone else can fill in the details here that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, let's take a comment in the front, and we'll note that. I'm sure we'll get some comments on that. Yeah.
Just, you were talking about the north and the south. As you're talking, I don't know where they're located, so it's hard for me to even listen. Is there some place in the report that would refer to, and what does that include? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah, no,
I
it's
didn't
not
even
right
know we
now.
had a south, never mind. And then where is it, so?
Great question. Yeah, no, that's a good comment. So we have just a couple of maps in the report as a whole, so we probably could benefit from marking some of these sites that folks might not be familiar with. And I'll add Gully Brook to that list too, because
Okay,
a
yeah.
lot of people can't find that on the map.
Where that, yeah.
Although Gully Brook is one example, it has gotten a lot of attention. We tried to figure out how to clean it, ask for some money from the state for that. But as you said, most people can't find it on a map because it's not even there part of the time.
So, I would agree that the unburying of the Park River is not a realistic. It's a much longer conversation, so I just wanted to say that. But I would agree that the north and the south branches need to be included. Gully Brook,
Yep.
Cemetery Brook, which is flows in past the Hooper School. There's a beautiful little lot east of the Hooper's north of the Hooper School that was never. It was value engineered out of the the environmental restoration of that school, and that could be restored. So I think the issue of maps, especially in the green category, the devil's going to be in the details. I mean, my hunch is that a lot, I think the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan is dated. Of course, they worked on it 10 years ago, and I think that both the North and the South Branch, again, the whole riparian corridors that we now know are the most valuable parts to the future generations. It's those trees, it's those floodplains.
So we'll
And
massage
that
that
wasn't in the scope of the North Branch Park River Watershed Management Plan, just for the record. So there really needs to be a better understanding of the riparian corridors, which are the most valuable for climate resilience.
Thank you. Yeah, we got it. Thank you so much. Wait, where's my waste section? Oh, it doesn't matter. Put that. Okay. All right. So I will just tell you what is in the waste section then. Really quickly. All right. Oh, was there another comment? Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Hi. In the back.
So you're trying to connect people to the river, and I think you make a really great point for those who are, like our focus is somewhere else, and I appreciate all the individuals that seem like they're really engaged in the tree and educating, I think, the residents of Hartford to see how important this is to our city. So I appreciate this understanding and learning so much. And when you're talking about reconnecting to the river, what do you mean by that? What does that mean?
So the way it's described, that's a great question. So the way it's described in the plan is taking out portions of 91. So you probably heard in the news that there's been a proposal by by a Congressman John Larson, to remove some or all of 91, to bury it, to move the I-84 interchange. So we actually do say in the plan that part of connecting the river back to the city is probably taking some of that big infrastructure and moving it out, and doing something else with it. In the meantime, though, there's also other parts of the plan that talk about the underpasses and the existing infrastructure as being a potential, we could maybe still connect through some of those, but the big fundamental thing that probably needs to change going forward when it comes to the river is the I-91 and the barrier it creates. So that's what we're really talking about when we say reconnecting. And if you go to the plan, you can see that is what's in the descriptor part of the plan for those sections.
The riverfront is where, like they do festivals there, so
That's a great, yeah. So
just moving this out.
So you're talking about Mortensen Riverfront Plaza, which is one of the few places that people can get to the river. But to get there, you kind of have to climb up, you got to climb down. And Charter Oak Landing in the southern part of the city is another place, but we actually can't access most of the river other than those, couple of distinct locations. You'll also be able to, starting, I think maybe a year from now, you'll be able to take a trail from that Mortensen Riverfront Plaza all the way north to the Windsor line and connect to Windsor trails on a trail meant for bicycles and pedestrians. But again, that's just a trail, so to make a really big change, you'd have to get rid of the highway. That's the thought. And again, that's a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year enterprise, and it won't happen in 15 years, the whole thing. But if we say now, this is something that we need to do in order to transform a big part of the city, then it's more likely that it will happen. All right, so let me just read to you, since it's come up and since it is part of this category, didn't make it to the slides, my apologies, our category about waste. So we have capped our landfill, we have banned plastic bags, we have seen a lot of resident support for changing Hartford's reputation as, I think we call it in the plan, the region's dumping ground. And in order to do that, these are the goals that people have told us that they want to see. Eliminating the trash incinerator, so getting that waste plant out of the city. I'll read a couple of them. Eliminate illegal dumping. So back to your point about littering, I think that's something that we heard over and over again. Recycling, although, you've probably seen some of the things in the news recently saying that towns are losing money on recycling. We're going to have to think of something completely different. We also included in here composting on a large scale, so composting waste. And again here, the state as a whole is in a crisis when it comes to the amount of waste that people are producing. So the state, we think, or we hope, is going to actually change some of its policies to require or allow composting in the future. So we think that that's going to happen. And we want to be sure that we're at the forefront pushing that. We do have, and if you had seen the plan draft, this image, you would have seen Blue Earth composting. They've done pilot programs at Billings Forge. They serve individual residents throughout the city. We know it can be done. It just needs to be scaled up. And other things, the proposal for a wood materials management program, converting the trash system potentially as to pay as you throw, recovering and redistributing institutional food, which often goes to waste. What else do I see here? Illegal pollution of waterways. And then finally, consistent with our plastic bag ban, a ban on styrofoam and plastic restaurant packaging, which is probably killing us. Not to put a depressing note at the end of that list. But actually, I mean, these are things that more than one person has said at public meetings. These are not, some of these may sound pie in the sky. We'll ban plastic, packaging for food and styrofoam. But other communities have done it, and we've heard a lot of concern about toxins that we're putting in our bodies, in our riverways, in our land. And so people do see this as a big concern. Yes?
Or so, a fellow from the University of Georgia came up and he had a compacting machine and something arc, and I can't remember, plasma arc, something like that, which takes a huge amount of garbage and makes blocks out of them that can be used for building. I think we should maybe look into that again as some solution.
Okay.
University of Georgia, and it's plasma arc, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Any other comments about this category? Yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure.
I was just wondering why on my mistake, any reference to urban farming, putting a garden, growing food.
Yes, that is a page in our live category. In our
Which category?
in our live. So I'll go back actually to these. Yeah, no, we would never forget food. Food is 1/6 of our climate action plan. And actually, so the categories for those, we can come back around to these. So we've just covered energy, fauna, flora, resiliency, river, and waste, verbally. The other category in food, in live, food is the first one. We do these in alphabetical order: food, health, housing, safety, schools, and social services. But in the area of food, now that I have my own plan open, I can just give you a quick preview because I know these issues too are very interrelated, food and the environment, which is why we included food in the climate action plan. So the things that we're looking at in the food category, again, just verbally, I can tell you, attracting grocery stores is the top one that we heard over and over again. Not necessarily at the large scale, but the medium and large scale, and not one, but in multiple parts of the city. Attracting restaurants that can complement our existing restaurants and offerings. Facilitating indoor commercial farming. Revitalize or move the regional market. So we know that is a great resource and people don't use it. That's been a conversation that we've been having with the state. Increase schools' local food sourcing to 50%. The next one caused a lot of discussion at our commission meeting on Tuesday night when we were looking at these, but it hung in there as an item, which is earn a reputation for vegetarian and sustainable cuisine. Can be controversial. We heard from the North End seniors early on in this process that that when they were younger, Hartford was filled with fruit trees in people's yards, and that they would go into the fruit trees, into the yards, and grab an apple or grab something when they were hungry or passing on their way through school. And that concept kind of took on a life of its own as we brought it up at other meetings. So we do include in here, develop a front yard fruit and nut tree program. But it really came from that conversation, and people love the idea. Coordinating and consolidating food production. So the community gardens, school gardens, and other local agriculture programs, making them into a system rather than these sort of piecemeal things that happen. And then we also had some very strong perspectives on food pantries and the fact that we operate a large number of food pantries very close to each other, but at different times of the day, and it may not be the best serve the people who need the services. So coordinating food pantries in a more consistent way and really trying to figure out how that system works in providing services. That was an issue in the area of food that we included. So those are the things that are in that category. And yes.
How did you choose the locations? Because it almost seems more like central.
Yes, and so
north end.
Yeah, and so they are fairly central locations. I sent out a message to about 85 people, asking them for to host meetings. So the 6 meetings that were scheduled ended up being at somewhat central locations, which, in some ways might work since we're not doing north end, south end planning presentations. So sort of everybody can kind of come together, but you're right. They're located in Parkville, Asylum Hill, in the sort of Charter Oak, Sheldon, Charter Oak. So they are located more in the central part. If there are other places that want to host, we're more than happy to Yes, so I did talk with the owner. So the owner of Vibes Uptown, for example, offered a spot, but we haven't been able to work out the logistics. So we're hoping that maybe some of these, some extra locations. We have also the full month of April too for additional meetings. So we'll hope for some extra logistics being worked out. Yes.
We talked about recycling.
Yeah.
It's just such a problem for any apartment building.
Yes.
And I mean, as a person who wants to better this environment, it's hard to. The apartment building I live in, there's one dumpster for 2 buildings. The other building has far more people living.
Yeah, so you raise a good point about the recycling by large apartment buildings, and so they are required to do it. They have been required to do it per city code, but we just revised the housing code. The city council did. Your councilman sitting right behind you, Mr. Gale, was one of the leaders of that effort. And the new housing code does make a housing code violation the failure to provide for recycling bins. So we're hoping that maybe as we roll out the housing code and enforce the housing code, that actually building owners become more aware of that obligation and abide by it, because it is something that that's really important. We also, the city helped Vecinos Unidos in Frog Hollow get a grant for Spanish language recycling education, a small grant. But they went around to different buildings in Frog Hollow and tried to educate tenants and landlords about their obligations to recycle in a very positive way. And so, it's on a small scale that seemed to have worked a little bit, but it's an uphill battle to make sure that everybody's fulfilling their obligations under these codes. Yes, Councilman.
So I don't know if it's appropriate to the waste section of this, but just kind of picking up on the enforcement concept and the comments that you made earlier about littering. It would be wonderful, of course, if we could sort of change the whole culture so that we eliminated littering. And I note that the city actually has ordinances that require all commercial building owners to pick up the litter in front of their buildings every single day. But we certainly have not had resources, maybe we haven't had the will either, I'm not sure, but we certainly haven't had the resources to go out and enforce that. But that might be the type of thing that would start a cultural change on how we live, how our avenues look, how our corridors look. So just something to think about. Again, I don't know if that's appropriate for your plan, because really more of enforcement we have right now.
No, that's it. So part of what we heard again early on in the process and continuing was, can the city plan itself be something that changes self-perceptions about Hartford and that elevates all of our behavior to the standard that we want to see and aspire to have in 15 years. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable comment to make now, and again, one that we hope trickles up through the process to say, look at these images, and we worked pretty hard on the images that you see in the plan to both reflect a wide variety of experiences of people in Hartford, but also to instill a sense of pride of the things that we are doing. So again, if you go through the images, we did want to show people, look, we're working on these issues. We've got beekeepers here. We've got people planting trees. We've got people, investing in their private funding in microgrids. We've got people picking up rain barrels, taking time out of a Saturday to do that. We've got, people cleaning out the Keeney Park Pond in the bottom right. We have people who are really actively working to make Hartford better. And we want the city plan and the images in the plan to show everybody that we're doing this. And, we hope for a better future. So I think I'm going to end on that note because I know we have limited time, but I just wanted to thank, I'm going to end on that note because I know you guys were very gracious in letting us join your presentation, but thank you, former Councilman McDonald and Jackie and Bernie and all of you guys for being here. We'll take more comments. Stick around. We'll take more comments as we trickle out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.